Let's try something a little different today and weave a tale of poverty in amongst the research that we've done. No place but here, Nancy Olson, EFR 506. Vermont's a beautiful place, isn't it? And so is the desert. Both are also full of pockets of poverty. Garrett Kaiser in 1988 wrote a book called In No Place But Here, where he wrote about teaching in rural America in northeastern Vermont. His stories brought to life his students and their culture very much, and a lot of his culture reminded me of the culture that I grew up in. And so I kind of wanted to weave the two together and see if we can't make a tale. The Line, Poverty in America, is a film about people who live below the poverty line. According to the U.S. Census Bureau, in 2011, 46 million Americans live in poverty, and the Organization for Economic Cooperation and Development further states that this is the third highest poverty rate amongst developed nations, ahead only of Turkey and Mexico. Did you know in Vermont and in California there are people who must decide between food or heat? Poverty's perspective. There is a certain amount of pride that comes with being independent, and there is a certain amount of shame that comes from having to beg for every single thing that you get. See the trailer? I grew up in a trailer kind of like that, and we would do anything rather than go on the dole. We were trash pickers, we were recyclers, but we weren't people who took from others. America's perspective, though, is that people in the city are poor because they are oppressed, discriminated against, and alienated. But people in the country are poor because they're too stupid to realize they ought to be living in the city. Kind of like that short bus, you know. You're so stupid there's no bus short enough for you. Now, that's how Americans feel about the country folk, even though there's plenty of people in poverty in the city. Rural populations. There's something contrastingly chaste about equally stigmatized in the image of a pregnant girl standing by her locker at school. Two roads diverged in yellow wood begins a nice poem, but roads in the world crisscross as much as they diverge, and you do not have to stay on this exit forever. And that's why I want to get into education because, you know, when I was young and in crisis and needed help, I went back to college and they helped me, and that's what I want to be able to do for others. Working class whites. According to the U.S. Bureau of Labor, more than 7 million Americans are working 2 or more jobs just to make ends meet. When I was young, I went to school full time, I worked full time, and I took care of 3 kids. And that's really hard to do. And if it weren't for the fact that I went back to college and I had faculty who cared and who were responsive to my needs, who helped me get a part-time job, I don't know what I would have done. Education. His grade was indeed a very high C, a healthy C, a robust C, a C about to turn into a B. His mother was unimpressed. Eddie is capable of an A, she said. And that's what saved me, was my mother always said. You know, A is for average, B is for barely average, C is for can't come home, D is for dead, and F is for your funeral. So you better come home with an average grade. Oppression. I just drove there and I sat there and I couldn't get out of the car. You don't want to admit you are that defeated. You have been brought up never to be a charity case. And that's John in the movie when he's talking about the first time he ever went to a food pantry. And I remember going to a food pantry. I remember using food stamps and such shame. But you know, education is the way out for these people, and if we're going to just discriminate against them and say that they're lazy, they're stupid, they don't have any skills, they prefer poverty, then how are we going to ever help them to become something other than what they are? Alienation, you know, it's not so often the disdain a person on the 10th rung of a ladder shows to one on the first as it is the disdain someone on the 5th rung of a ladder shows to one on the 3rd. I used to be your neighbor. You know, we're all living paycheck to paycheck. We're one step away from being the homeless guy. But we're all so afraid to admit that we don't even stop to help them. Roots. But we all have roots, you know. We all have a place we call home. And for many, the relief I feel at coming home must be magnified 100 times. What must it be like to return from almost unbroken anonymity to a place where nearly everyone you meet knows you, greets you, asks how you're getting on? And I grew up in a place like that. People said, you're leaving Barstow, don't worry, you'll be back. And most people were. And so I want to make my community a better place, and that's why I'm in school. Because, we need to bring our kids hope. Our students are placing their faith, their yearning, and their pain in our hands, often because they have no better place in which to put them. And when I did that 20 years ago, I had people who helped me, and now I want to be the person who helps people who are like I was. Thank you, and have a wonderful night. My references are Kaiser G, No Place But Here, A Teacher's Vocation in a Rural Community, and Midget Linda, Director of Line Poverty in America. Have a great night. Bye.